We often misunderstand silence. We see it as the absence of love, the death of connection. But silence, real silence, is not always a bad thing. It can be a pause, a moment of reflection, a space between two people who haven't yet found the right words. The real danger isn't in the silence itself. It's in what we do with it. See, when silence becomes avoidance, when it becomes a strategy to dodge discomfort rather than a signal to pay attention, something begins to break. Not loudly, quietly, slowly. Two people can live in the same house, sleep in the same bed, and still feel oceans apart. That's emotional distance. And that, if left unaddressed, is what turns love into memory. But here's the truth: love doesn't end when we feel distant. Love ends when we stop trying to bridge the distance. So how do we rebuild? Silence often gets a bad reputation in relationships. We talk about the silent treatment like it's inherently cruel. We associate silence with disconnection, emotional withdrawal, and sometimes even rejection. But silence by itself is not the problem. In fact, silence can be powerful. It can be a pause to breathe, a moment to reflect, a space to listen. What truly damages relationships is not the silence. It's the avoidance that often hides behind it. Avoidance is what erodes trust. Avoidance is pretending things are fine when they're not. It's deflecting hard conversations, brushing issues under the rug, choosing comfort over truth. When silence is used as a cover for avoidance, that's when it becomes dangerous. Because silence then doesn't give room for connection. It creates confusion. It feeds anxiety. It builds walls. We have to understand the difference between healthy silence and defensive silence. Healthy silence happens when two people are present with each other, even in quiet. It's the kind of silence that allows you to process before you speak. It says, I care enough to pause before I react. But defensive silence says, I don't want to deal with this. I'd rather shut down than show up. And that silence, that brand of emotional hiding, slowly chips away at intimacy. Avoidance disguises itself in many forms. I'm just tired. No, it's not the right time. Let's talk about it later. But later never comes. And so the emotional gap widens. One partner starts to feel invisible. The other feels overwhelmed. And neither is saying what needs to be said. That's not peace, it's suppression. That's not maturity, it's fear. Most relationships don't fall apart because of one massive mistake. They crumble under the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. 1,000 avoided moments. 1,000 silences that were meant to protect, but instead created distance. Avoidance isn't passive, it's active disconnection. It's making a choice to withdraw instead of engage. There's a common belief that avoiding conflict helps keep the peace. But avoiding conflict doesn't create peace. It creates a quiet war. A war where no one raises their voice, but everyone raises their guards. And when your guard is up, love can't get in. Vulnerability becomes rare. Authenticity disappears. And suddenly, the relationship feels more like a performance than a partnership. The irony is that we avoid conversations because we're afraid of hurting the relationship, yet that very avoidance is what hurts it most. Honesty may be hard, but avoidance is harmful. Speaking up may feel risky, but silence rooted in fear is far riskier. Because while words can be messy, silence can be misunderstood. And what's misunderstood can become the foundation for resentment. So, if you find yourself growing quiet in your relationship, ask yourself, am I being silent to reflect? Or am I avoiding something I need to face? Am I creating space to think? Or am I retreating because I'm scared of what might happen if I speak? Rebuilding love after emotional distance begins with this distinction. We have to be brave enough to stop hiding behind our silence, to step into the tension and speak the truth in love, to stop avoiding the discomfort and start honoring the connection. Because when silence is chosen as a tool of understanding, it can deepen love. But when it's used as an escape, it always does damage. Silence is not the enemy. It can be a teacher. It can be healing. But only when we're not using it to run away. Only when we're willing to follow it up with truth, with vulnerability, with courage. In the end, it's not the quiet that breaks relationships. It's the absence of intentionality within the quiet. Emotional distance in a relationship can feel terrifying. It's that invisible space where words stop flowing, where eye contact becomes rare, where once vibrant energy turns into a muted routine. But as painful as it is, emotional distance is not a definitive end. It's not the final chapter. It's not a life sentence. It's a signal, a flare being sent up into the sky, a quiet cry for help that says, something's off. Something's missing. Please pay attention. When we experience emotional distance, our instinct is often to panic. We assume the relationship is broken, or worse, that love has vanished. But emotional distance doesn't always mean love is gone. In many cases, it means that love has gone quiet, that it's hiding beneath layers of exhaustion, hurt, unmet needs, or unspoken fears. It's signaling that something within the dynamic needs care, not condemnation. Attention, not abandonment. One of the most important things to recognize is that emotional distance is often a symptom, not the root issue. It's a reflection of deeper concerns. Maybe someone feels unheard, unseen, unappreciated. Maybe stress from work, unresolved trauma, or personal insecurity is pulling them inward. Maybe both people have been stuck in survival mode, focused on responsibilities instead of relationship. Emotional distance shows up when connection is being compromised. And that means it's not a punishment, it's information. Too many people make the mistake of interpreting emotional distance as a sign that it's over. They see the withdrawal and automatically assume failure. They stop trying. They start building emotional armor of their own. And soon, two people who once promised to be teammates start playing defense against each other. But when we pause and view distance as a signal rather than a sentence, everything shifts. Because now, instead of reacting with fear, we can respond with curiosity. What is this space between us trying to say? Where did we stop paying attention? What's been left unsaid? These are questions that open doors instead of closing them. They create opportunities for repair, for clarity, for renewal. But it requires presence. It requires a willingness to lean in instead of pull away. Because closing the emotional gap isn't about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It's about slowly and consistently returning to each other with intention. It's easy to misinterpret withdrawal as rejection. But sometimes people pull away not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to explain their pain, or because they've stopped feeling safe to express it. Emotional distance might mean someone's waiting for permission to be vulnerable again. It might mean they're hoping, deep down, that you'll notice the silence and not ignore it, that you'll lean into it with empathy rather than accusation. Relationships require maintenance. Just like any living thing, they need regular nourishment, attention, and care. When that's missing, even unintentionally, emotional distance grows like a shadow. But shadows can shrink the moment light is reintroduced. And that light comes from honest conversation, open-hearted listening, and mutual responsibility. Distance isn't defeat. It's a direction. It tells us where the relationship needs healing. And when both partners recognize that, they can stop seeing each other as the enemy and start seeing the distance as the shared challenge to overcome. The truth is, emotional closeness is not constant. It ebbs and flows. It stretches and contracts. What matters is how we respond in those seasons of space. Do we armor up, or do we soften? Do we withdraw too, or do we bravely re-engage? When we understand that emotional distance is a signal, an invitation to realign, reconnect, and rebuild, we stop fearing it. We start working with it. And from that space, love doesn't just return, it grows deeper roots. Because love that survives distance and learns from it is the kind of love that lasts. When someone we love is hurting, our first instinct is often to fix it. We want to make the pain go away. We want to offer solutions, give advice, offer steps to improvement. It feels like love to jump in with answers. But in reality, what most people need first isn't a solution. It's to be heard. Healing begins not with solving the problem, but with creating a space where someone feels truly seen, understood, and safe. Listening is an act of emotional generosity. It requires us to put our egos aside, to resist the urge to control the narrative or speed up someone's healing process. It asks us to be fully present, not to defend ourselves or explain, but to simply witness someone else's truth. And in relationships, especially when emotional distance has crept in, this kind of listening is the first and most important step toward healing. When we try to fix too quickly, we often send the unintentional message that the other person's feelings are inconvenient, that they're too much, that their pain is a problem to be eliminated instead of a reality to be honored. Fixing can feel dismissive when what the heart truly longs for is empathy. Listening, on the other hand, says, I'm here. You don't have to hold this alone. One of the greatest misunderstandings in relationships is the belief that love is measured by how fast we can make the pain stop. But true love is measured by how deeply we're willing to sit in that pain with someone without needing to make it tidy. Because healing doesn't happen in quick fixes. It happens in presence, in patience, in saying, tell me more, instead of, here's what you should do. When someone opens up to us, especially after a period of silence or emotional distance, it's a fragile moment. It's not easy to be vulnerable. It takes courage to admit that you're hurting or confused or lost. And if that courage is met with correction instead of compassion, the door to reconnection quietly shuts. People don't always remember the solutions we gave them, but they always remember how we made them feel in their most tender moments. Healing conversations are not problem-solving sessions. They are sacred spaces where hearts speak and egos step back. They sound like, that must have been hard for you, or thank you for telling me. They look like staying quiet long enough to really hear what's being said. Not just the words, but the emotion underneath them. This doesn't mean there's never a time for solutions. Of course there is. But solutions should come later, after someone feels fully heard, after the story has been shared, the pain named, and the emotions acknowledged. Trying to solve too soon is like trying to build a house before you've cleared the wreckage. First, we need to listen. Then, together, we can rebuild. Listening well also means listening without defensiveness. Sometimes, when we hear something that makes us feel uncomfortable or guilty, we rush to justify our actions. We interrupt to explain our intentions. But healing doesn't happen when one person is on trial. It happens when both people are willing to hold space for each other's truth, even when it stings. In the end, healing isn't about fixing what's broken as quickly as possible. It's about mending what's been ignored, misunderstood, or neglected, with care, with attention, with trust. That process always starts with listening, because to feel heard is to feel valued. And once someone feels truly valued, they begin to believe they are safe again. From that safety, love can grow, walls can come down, distance can close. So if you're wondering how to begin healing the emotional distance in your relationship, start not with solutions, but with presence. Not with advice, but with listening. Because before a heart can open up again, it needs to know it won't be rushed, corrected, or dismissed. It needs to know it will be held. When a relationship has been strained by emotional distance, broken trust, or prolonged silence, there's often a temptation to repair it with big gestures. People make sweeping promises. They offer dramatic apologies. They talk about changing everything. And while those intentions may be sincere, they rarely create lasting change. Because the truth is, relationships aren't rebuilt in grand declarations. They're rebuilt in small, consistent moments. It's not about what you say once. It's about what you show up for every day. Big promises are emotionally satisfying in the moment. They can feel like hope, like certainty, like love coming back to life. But without follow-through, they become empty. Words without action start to hurt more than silence. Because when someone says, I'll never hurt you again, or things will be different now, the other person begins to hope. And if nothing changes, that hope becomes disappointment. And repeated disappointment turns into emotional withdrawal. Rebuilding love is not a performance. It's a process. It's not about proving something overnight. It's about earning trust slowly, moment by moment. That means showing up when it's inconvenient. Saying good morning even when things still feel tense. Asking how their day was even if you're unsure how they'll respond. These gestures may seem small, but they are the bricks of emotional repair. Because love after pain needs to be demonstrated, not just declared. Think of it this way: when someone feels emotionally disconnected, they're not looking for fireworks. They're looking for signs. Signs that they still matter. That you're paying attention. That you're not going to vanish when things get hard again. A cup of coffee made without asking. A text that says, just thinking of you. A willingness to listen without defensiveness. These little things carry the most weight because they come without demand. They're rooted in presence, not pressure. The reason small moments matter so much is because they create safety. Emotional safety doesn't come from one conversation. It comes from consistency, from reliability, from knowing that you will keep showing up, not just when it's easy or dramatic, but in the quiet, ordinary moments of life. Big promises can be broken with one mistake, but small efforts, done consistently, build resilience. Rebuilding also means recognizing that progress won't be linear. Some days will feel like a breakthrough. Others will feel like a setback. That's okay. The key is not perfection, it's persistence. You don't need to impress your partner with perfection. You need to reassure them with presence. To say, not just with your words, but with your actions, I'm still here. I still care. I'm willing to do the work even when it's hard. This is especially true when trust has been damaged. Trust doesn't come back with one, "I'm sorry." It comes back when someone sees that your behavior aligns with your words. When the apology isn't just spoken, but lived. When the small, daily acts of kindness, honesty, and empathy begin to restore what was broken. That's when healing starts to feel real. In a world obsessed with instant results and big gestures, it's easy to overlook the quiet power of the everyday. But true connection is built in the mundane. It's built when someone chooses to stay a little longer in the conversation, when they pause to ask, "Are you okay?" before walking away, when they choose patience over pride and presence over performance. So if you're trying to rebuild love, don't overpromise. Don't think you need to say the perfect thing or plan the perfect moment. Just start showing up, start noticing, start caring in the small ways. Because those small efforts, done with sincerity and consistency, are the foundation of real, lasting love. It's not the size of the gesture that matters. It's the heart behind it and the willingness to repeat it every day. Reconnection after emotional distance is never about finding the perfect words or the perfect moment. It's about finding the courage to be real again, to speak without a script, to let your guard down. And that only happens through vulnerability. You cannot rebuild closeness, trust, or intimacy without first being willing to be vulnerable. It's the gateway to healing, the foundation of all meaningful connection. Vulnerability often gets misunderstood. Some see it as weakness, as exposure, as giving someone the power to hurt you. But vulnerability isn't about being fragile. It's about being brave. It's choosing to show your true self, even when you're unsure how the other person will respond. It's saying, "I miss you." When your pride wants you to stay silent, it's admitting, "I'm scared," when your ego wants you to pretend everything's fine. Vulnerability is not about being dramatic. It's about being honest. When emotional distance sets in, what usually follows is self-protection. People stop sharing what they feel. They hide behind sarcasm, routine, or emotional detachment. They build walls, not out of cruelty, but out of fear, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being hurt again. And while those walls might protect us temporarily, they also keep out love. You can't experience deep connection through armor. You can only experience it through openness. Reconnection begins when one person is brave enough to take the first step. That doesn't mean giving a speech or bearing every wound at once. It can be as simple as saying, "This has been hard for me," or "I want to feel close to you again, but I don't know how." Those small admissions, raw, unfiltered human, invite the other person to do the same. Vulnerability is contagious. When one person shows up honestly, it gives permission for the other to meet them there. But vulnerability is also uncomfortable. It exposes your longing, your regrets, your hopes. It strips away the roles we play and asks us to show up as we are, not as who we think we should be. That's why it's so powerful, because it breaks the pattern. When two people are caught in emotional distance, they often fall into patterns of avoidance, blame, or silence. Vulnerability disrupts that. It says, "Let's stop pretending. Let's be real." It's important to know that being vulnerable doesn't guarantee a perfect response. You might be met with confusion, resistance, or even silence. But that doesn't make vulnerability a mistake. It makes it a moment of truth, because no matter how the other person reacts, you've honored your own integrity. You've shown up with heart. And that's how reconnection begins, not by controlling someone else's reaction, but by being accountable for your own expression. In relationships, the greatest intimacy is not physical, it's emotional. It's when someone knows your fears, your dreams, your doubts, and still chooses to stay. That kind of closeness doesn't come from surface-level conversation. It comes from depth, from those brave moments where someone says, "This is me. I hope you'll meet me here." And the other person replies, "I see you. I'm not going anywhere." So if you're trying to reconnect with someone, if emotional distance has made the relationship feel cold or confusing, don't wait for the perfect script. Don't wait for the other person to go first. Just be honest. Speak from your heart. Share your truth gently and clearly. That's where healing begins. That's where trust is rebuilt. That's how closeness returns. Because at the end of the day, connection isn't built on perfection. It's built on presence. It's not about saying the right thing. It's about saying the real thing. And that takes vulnerability, always. Love that has been tested by distance, emotional, physical, or both, can become something even more powerful than what existed before the gap. But it doesn't happen automatically. The love that survives emotional distance and comes back stronger only does so when two people are intentional about how they rebuild. It's not the distance that strengthens the bond, it's how you respond to the distance, how you repair the cracks, how you grow through the process together. Love after distance is not a return to what was, but the creation of something new, something wiser, deeper, and more resilient. When a relationship goes through emotional distance, it often exposes the weak spots. It highlights what was unspoken, unhealed, or taken for granted. That can be painful. It can bring up doubts, insecurities, and questions that never had room to surface before. But it can also be incredibly clarifying. Distance has a way of revealing what truly matters. It shows you whether you miss the person or just the routine. Whether you're ready to fight for the relationship or simply afraid of being alone. When two people realize that they want to come back together, not out of fear or obligation, but out of real love and mutual commitment, that realization becomes a turning point. But getting back together emotionally isn't about pretending the distance didn't happen. It's about acknowledging it, learning from it, and doing the work to prevent it from happening again in the same way. That means having the hard conversations. It means facing the reasons the distance formed in the first place, whether it was lack of communication, emotional neglect, unresolved pain, or just growing apart without realizing it. It requires a new level of honesty, not just with your partner, but with yourself. Love after distance thrives when both people are willing to take accountability for their part in the disconnect. It's never just one person's fault. Even if the responsibility is not equal, both contributed to the dynamic that allowed the emotional gap to grow, and both have the power to influence what happens next. That mutual ownership becomes the foundation of a healthier, more balanced relationship. What makes love stronger after distance is the realization that you don't want to repeat the same patterns. You become more aware of your triggers, your communication style, your emotional needs. You learn to listen better, not just to respond, but to truly understand. You become more intentional with your time, your words, your energy. Love becomes less about convenience and more about commitment. Rebuilding after distance also brings gratitude into the relationship. You stop taking the little things for granted. You cherish the presence of the other person because you've experienced what it's like to feel their absence. Small gestures begin to matter more. An unexpected hug, a heartfelt text, a moment of shared silence. The connection becomes more sacred, not because it's perfect, but because it's been chosen again with full awareness of the risk and reward. The truth is, distance changes people. And if you're lucky, it changes you both in a way that brings you closer. You start to value the deeper parts of your connection, the emotional intimacy, the trust, the safety, the friendship. You build from experience, not illusion. And what you create the second time around isn't just a patched up version of what was. It's a stronger foundation, forged by understanding and shaped by growth. Love after distance can be stronger, but only if you build it right. Not on empty promises or the fear of starting over, but on the lessons learned, the effort made, and the choice to show up differently this time. When two people are willing to grow, communicate, and heal together, they don't just restore love, they elevate it.